Zion Williamson is facing serious allegations, and no matter if they are true or not, this puts the Pelicans in a no-win situation. It's a bonus episode of Locked On Pelicans.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on a bonus show, we are going to talk about the very serious rape allegations that Zion Williamson is facing that came to light today. So a couple of things first with this, right? I'm passing no judgment here either way. That's not my place. That's for a court or a jury to decide. And we're going to look at both sides here, the claims and then Zion Williamson's counters, and just kind of lay out the facts as we have it. And then we're going to quickly shift into what it means for his place with the team, because that's what we need to be talking about here on a Locked On Pelicans podcast. So, of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, sometimes with a bonus show on an extra one on a weekend, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. So let's get into this a little bit here. And look, again, this is something that we've got to be careful about because these are allegations. Nothing is proven. There are just claims out there right now. So we're going to just lead with the facts as we have them. Something that I do think is important to note here is that this is a civil case. The plaintiff, the woman, is suing Zion Williamson. In a civil case, the party suing only needs to prove their case by what is, quote, a preponderance of evidence, which means that the evidence is more likely true than not true. So basically 51% true should this go to a jury. This is different than the beyond a reasonable doubt, shadow of a doubt, whatever it is in terms of a criminal case. Essentially the burden of proof in a civil case is much, much lower here. So another thing before we get into some of the claims and Zion's response to this is we do not know who the plaintiff is. I don't know if this is a person that we've heard about before or not. So let's get into this a little bit more and we'll kind of tell you how this likely plays out, but maybe not. Then we'll get into what it means for his time here in New Orleans and how it's put the Pelicans in an absolutely no-win situation. So the woman is accusing Zion Williamson of rape in addition to sexual, physical, emotional, and financial abuse over the span of a multi-year relationship. This was submitted in Los Angeles Superior Court on Thursday. Again, it's a woman identified as Jane Doe, so anonymous right now, that accuses Zion Williamson of, quote, continuing pattern of abusive, controlling, and threatening behavior over the course of a relationship that started when Zion was at Duke and lasted until 2023. So this goes from 2018 to 2023. It's a 12-page complaint here regarding this. It makes claims that he raped her multiple times, that he threatened not just her, but to harm her family as well. I'm not going to go into these specifically here. You can find these out if you want. But again, as it stands right now, these allegations, if true, and that's a big part of this, if true, is horrific, abhorrent, all of the negative words that you would want. And if this is true, his career is likely done. Zion's career is likely done. And you would imagine potentially there could be some criminal charges that could be forthcoming. Now, again, this is not innocent until proven guilty. That's not what a civil case is. It's just got to be 51% true. So we're not making claims either way on this. I don't have enough information to be able to do that in the first place here. Zion Williamson's lawyer put out, a release after the fact, and I'm going to read it to you here in response to these allegations. Quote, we take these allegations with the utmost seriousness and we unequivocally deny them. The allegations contained in the complaint are categorically categorically false and reckless. This is the plaintiff's third set of attorneys. This appears to be an attempt to exploit a professional athlete driven by a financial motive rather than any legitimate grievance. Mr. Williamson and the plaintiff never dated, but did maintain a consensual, casual relationship that began more than 6 years ago when he was 18 years old. The relationship ended years ago. At no point during or immediately after that relationship did the plaintiff raise any concerns. Only after the friendship ended did she begin demanding millions of dollars. Mr. Williamson reported the plaintiff's extortion attempts to law enforcement. We understand that arrest warrant was issued in connection with that report, and we are prepared to provide the court with documentation that supports these facts. Mr. Williamson also intends to file counterclaims and seek significant damages for this defamatory lawsuit. While these allegations are false, we recognize the seriousness of the claims and welcome the opportunity to prove the truth in court. We are confident that the legal process will expose the truth and fully vindicate Mr. Williamson, end quote. It's a pretty strong statement here. And again, this is something that to determine true, not true, all of that is something that the courts or a jury will need to do here. Now, the way this plays out is these tend to get settled. You know, a claim is made. They don't want any discovery in a lawsuit or anything like that. So these claims often get settled. And, you know, then it just goes away and you don't know who did what or anything like that. And that is the most likely scenario here. Not the only one, but the most likely. You know, if Zion Williamson intends to fight these allegations and that statement says so, you know, and you can prove that these accusations are false, you'd need proof of that. And I don't know if that's easy, but again, I'm not a lawyer here. You know, the plaintiff, the accuser, will be held accountable in that sense if these are false claims. But that's up to Zion Williamson when it comes down to it. But regardless, these are very serious allegations. Whether you believe them or not, they're serious allegations. And again, I'm not saying either way when it comes to all of this. This is the type of thing that the Pelicans are going to look at, and it's going to make them wonder, do you want to keep building around Zion Williamson? We've heard some reports about this, and I've even reported on some of this stuff years in the past about how they don't love the off-court stuff with him. Whether these are true or not, this has put the Pelicans in a no-win situation. And I'll explain what I mean by that and why they just are in a bad spot. Again, whether these are true, you know, obviously if it's true, they're in a bad spot. But say these aren't true, the Pelicans are still in a bad spot. And I'll explain. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, you know what time it is, playoff season, and that means big performances and even bigger rewards. So DoorDash is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for Dash Pass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh You Score. Anytime a player drops 50 or more in a playoff game, Dash Pass members score a free 3-piece crispy tender combo from Wingstop the very next day. Just place an order of $20 or more, use code Wingstop50 at checkout, and that combo is yours. Crispy, delicious tenders that are totally free. So the offer is valid from noon to midnight the day after the game. Terms apply. You ever look at your delivery orders and just wonder why it's so expensive? Double, triple what you were expecting, and it's all those fees added up into all of that? With Dash Pass, $0 delivery fees. And exclusive perks like this. Think about how much money you could save. So here's the place. Sign up for Dash Pass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long. And when any player scores 50 plus in a playoff game, Dash Pass members can grab a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the next day with a $20 or more order and code Wingstop50. That's Dash Pass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everyday. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And don't forget, for your second listen, Locked On NBA Big Board. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. So let's keep talking about the Zion Williamson allegations. And again, we are not passing judgment or anything like that. If I say something that sounds like that, I'm looking at it through the lens of the team and how they're going to react. And you can agree or disagree if they should act that way, but I have a pretty good idea of how they're going to view this sort of thing. So no matter what, and no matter how this plays out, this puts the Pelicans in a bad spot. In a bad spot. Maybe they're fed up with Zion Williamson and the off-court stuff. Now, it's in addition to, the lack of games played on court as well. That's a big part of this. But the original Mariah Mills thing from about 2 years ago or so, I think it was, maybe it was 3, I forget exactly, was not something they liked. And I put a show out at the time that this is the type of thing that might make Gayle Benson and the Pelicans want to trade Zion Williamson, this kind of stuff. And a lot of people at the time were like, are you sure? That doesn't seem fair. Look, it has nothing to do whether it's fair or not, right? He's allowed to have relations with whomever he wants to do. That's fine. I don't care. Truthfully, the team might, though. They may not like that. And again, you might think they shouldn't care, and you could be right on that, but it doesn't matter if that's what the team thinks. And at that time, I did a show that was like, this is the type of stuff that might want to make them trade Zion Williamson. It's kind of coming true right now, right? There were reports this offseason from Shamit Dua, and I trust his reporting, that there was mandates from Gayle Benson to trade Zion Williamson due to the off-court stuff. Whether it's that Mariah Mills scandal, whether it was more recently women he's been involved in, one was stalking and beat up another, and we don't need to go into that. You can find that yourself. And now this. And something that's worth noting on this is Zion does not control what other people do, right? Zion does not control if an ex of his goes to his new girlfriend or whatever the relationships are and fights that person. That's got nothing to do, truthfully, with Zion Williamson and nothing that he did wrong, right? If someone say this one is extortion and I don't know, that's not something he controls. That's that person's actions, right? And keep that in mind here for a second. So, but maybe the Pelicans don't care and they're like, we just don't want to deal with this. Now, if you try and trade him, you're going to get a terrible return for him. I don't think his value was sky high around the league in the first place. And this type of stuff for someone who just only played 30 games last season is not going to drive up the price. So him, if you're viewing him simply as an asset, is at an all-time low. So you could also go a different direction here and waive Zion Williamson. I believe his contract is unguaranteed going forward because of the amount of games that he missed. That's the creative contract that David Griffin signed him to. You can get out of it and waive him and owe him no money, and it basically voids the remainder of it. But that also doesn't help things. It gets rid of this. It means we don't talk about the stuff. They don't have to deal with stuff like that, right? Over on Airline Drive. But it doesn't make you a better team. And look, there's going to be PR hits to the Pelicans when it comes to this sort of thing, right? Look, whether or not whatever happens with these allegations, and let's say they settle. So you don't really know if there was fault or not in that sort of thing. A new team is going to pick up Zion Williamson if you waive him, and they will take a PR hit with that up front. But they probably don't care because teams care about winning and making money. And if you can get Zion Williamson for cheap and take a flyer on him, that can likely help you and isn't going to hurt you in any sort of way. So that team gets a PR hit, they weather the storm. And then if Zion Williamson plays well, the conversation goes away in a year. It's usually how it is, right? For the most part. It might linger a little bit, but it goes away in about a year. So Zion Williamson plays well, and that team that picks him up looks incredible. And then the Pelicans are the butt of every joke. They're going to be criticized all over the place. There's going to be memes made about them, and you're going to have a lot of people saying they're the worst franchise in the NBA. You waived Zion Williamson. Now look at him thriving with another team over these allegations or whatever they were, right? So you don't want that. Now, it's not different necessarily from where the Pelicans stand right now. It's thought of as one of the worst organizations around the league. But you obviously don't want more of this and a storm potentially brewing in the future here. So maybe that means you don't get rid of him and you try and deal with the PR hit right now. And we've seen, these organizations kind of do that recently, right? Like, look, they tried to sign Deshaun Watson, or trade for Deshaun Watson and do all of that and didn't really care about the allegations and the bad PR that came with it. Didn't end up happening and they just kind of moved on. Right. And it's not something that's like lingering around them or anything like that anymore. So, maybe they want to just take the PR hit here and deal with it. But if Zion doesn't play well or doesn't play, he's going to play well if he plays, but doesn't play 70 games, right? The injury issues still linger. It's going to be, well, you should have waived him. You should have waived him. You should have waived him. Like, what is this team doing, continuing to go all in on Zion Williamson? If they trade him, if, it's going to be for a bad return. If he plays well, they're going to look bad. If they waive him and he plays well, okay, you're going to look bad. If you keep him and he doesn't play, then you're going to look bad. Even if you waive him or trade him and he doesn't play well or he remains injured, the return is either zero in case you waive him or so bad in a trade. It's not like you're going to look at that and be like, wow, look at what the Pelicans got. They fleeced that other team. Again, they're in a no-win situation because of this, right? And look, even if we try and figure out how this ends well, and we'll talk more about that coming up in the next segment here in a bonus episode of Locked On Pelicans, right? Say these allegations are false. Zion pursues it as far as he can. These allegations are proven false, and there's repercussions for the plaintiff here in this situation. In one sense, yeah, that's good for Zion Williamson, but in another sense, like, he's a victim here, and this situation would be awful for him. And that might be the best case scenario with something like this. That's not great, I think. And, even if it's settled, let's say, right, where no one admits anything and we just kind of go about our day like this didn't happen at all for the most part, and Zion plays or doesn't play, this is still going to follow a little bit, right? Like, it's still going to follow a little bit. I don't want to get too much into this part here, but look, when you look at how Kobe Bryant is referred to at times, you still see, like alleged rapist with all of that, right? That was settled. That case was done. And no one admitted fault or anything like that, but it's still alleged, and that follows you when it comes to all of this. It's an awful situation for anybody involved in this, to be a part of, I think. And so it's tough to find a way. There is one or two, and we'll look at those coming up next, but it's tough to find a way where one or two of the, where this ends well. And this is why they think that the Pelicans are in a no-win situation. Say you waive Zion Williamson and you get his contract off the books. Right? I'll actually even pull up my Pelicans cap sheet right here to try and see what that kind of does for them. He's making $39.446090 million, about $39.5 million. If you are an everydayer and you listen to my show on the salary cap primer, right? The Pelicans are over the soft cap by $28 million. They're about $4.3 million to the luxury tax line. If you just delete Zion's salary out here, they only have $10.5 million in cap space. Not as much as the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, right? Now, you have tons of room to the luxury tax, but it's not like you can just replace Zion Williamson with someone in free agency or even in a trade to make your team significantly better. So your books are still not great with only $10.5 million in cap space. You can maybe find a way to get more. Maybe in a year you'll have a bunch with CJ McCollum expiring along with Kelly Olynyk. And that's a way to kind of reset. And that's important to kind of consider here. But for next season, you're just bad with no flexibility, with more flexibility than you had, but not extreme flexibility here. So yeah, you get them off the books, but you can't do anything about it. And I think that's part of the problem as well for the New Orleans Pelicans here with just how it's kind of been. At that point, you're going to take 2 years just to kind of hit year zero of your rebuild, and you're only left with the 7th pick, which again will get you a good player here, but it's not the same as a top 4 pick, top 5 pick even, or something like that. So that's what's super disappointing about the situation they find themselves in with this. There is one way it ends well. And we'll discuss that coming up here next in today's episode, a bonus episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances. Jalen Brunson the other night, a major momentum shifts and can't-miss moments. So whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. So with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Do you think the Indiana Pacers are going to close out the series on Saturday night? I think they're going to get it done at home. They're favored by 6. Is that too much? Is it going to be closer? The series has been really close. Which way would you go? You can make it happen over at FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. That's $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, including a kind of Saturday bonus show here. Covered everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. It means you listen Monday through Friday. If you were an everydayer when I said just waiving Zion Williamson doesn't fix your books, you'd already have known that, because you heard me talk about it just the other day on the Salary Cap Show. Go give that a listen if you want to know what the luxury tax is. First apron, second apron. Did you know there's 3 mid-level exceptions and you only get one of them? I cover it all on that show. And for your second listen today, Locked On Saints QB battle. Who's going to be starting in the preseason on game 1 of the regular season? And should we be excited about it? Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints is covering everything black and gold. He's literally like driving over to my place right now as I record this. We're going to go hang out. So go make Locked On Saints your second listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we are talking about the Zion Williamson allegations, and there are allegations now that's worth keeping in mind. Keep in mind, it's also a civil case, so the burden of proof is a little bit different here. And again, passing no judgment when it comes to this, right? There's nothing to do with that. That's not my place here. Looking at it through the lens of the team, that they are likely going to be not happy about this, right? Even if these are false allegations, they're not going to like that he was in this situation or associating with people that might do this. Look, I don't doubt that professional athletes or even just people with a lot of money have, these type of allegations and claims placed against them in money grabs. I'm sure that happens in some capacity. What degree, I do not know. And I'm sure they face this far more than someone, just regular people would, right? It's kind of the nature of it. But you also still don't hear of this being a regular thing in the NBA. Now, Dante Cunningham, former Pelican, actually went through this, where the claims were made, and there was some proof out there against him that they then found was false. And after being out of the league for a little bit, he came back and had a nice little run here in New Orleans. But you don't hear this regularly in terms of these type of allegations in these scenarios. Domestic violence, other things you hear, but not quite like this, and certainly not regularly, which is why these are not just something that you can hand wave away. You should never do that in anything like this and let it all play out. Hence why we're not making claims of judgment or he's guilty, not guilty, even though that's not the right wording to use here. But this is the type of thing that I think you can look at and go, if you're the team like Zion, what are you doing? Who are you associating with? Why are you associating with these people? And as I said before, right, he's a victim in this potentially too. He does not control other people's actions. But when you're where he is, you need to take precautions. You need to be very careful of who you bring around you and who you associate with. That's, an unfortunate reality of being in the position that they're in. And you can claim, well, they shouldn't have to. You're right, they shouldn't, but we don't live in a perfect world. And I think we've seen that Zion has made some questionable choices. Again, it's not judgment against him. I'm not like you did something wrong, you shouldn't do. It's not my place on that. I mean that. And again, I do think there's, in some of the things that have happened off court, he is a victim himself when it comes to that, because those are out of his control entirely. But when you're running a franchise and it's about winning and not having distractions around or all of that stuff, he's not delivering on that, right? This is, before these allegations came out, it was a big part of why I traded him away in our Locked On mock draft, right? And, we're going to kind of redo some of that now. So, when you look at that, the team just might be fed up. You can stand behind Zion Williamson against, what he claims are false allegations if he's playing 70 games, 80 games, right? But if he's playing 30, now, and he could have played more this past season. I did a show on that where it's like, he probably could have played about 55 games or so. I think they kind of shut him down towards the end. He wasn't playing second night of back-to-backs when he could have, all of that stuff, right? So it's not 30 is the actual number, but also a little bit misleading, I think, in a sense. But the fact is, he hasn't played in a playoff game. And, the seasons you've made the playoffs, he's been injured because of that. And that is, unfortunately, like the reality of the situation here. So it's disappointing that this is a thing in the first place. You don't hear this with tons of other superstars and stuff like that, right? And that's probably what you would want. And I think that's what the team would want. So if you're going to build around a guy who at times feels like he can be a liability, whether it's by not playing or whatever, yeah, it's going to make you maybe not want to build around him anymore and just decide that this experiment or this time is over. Now, there is a way this ends well, right? And we've been leading up to it here. The way this ends well is that these allegations are proven false, and Zion Williamson sees this as a wake-up call. Again, I'm not blaming him for being in this situation. I'm really not. But you do need to realize you're in the situation and maybe make some changes to the way you operate, live your life, all of those things to avoid situations like this. And that's the unfortunate truth of being famous, having money, and some of that stuff. So if he realizes like, this isn't what I want. And again, he's probably here being like, this isn't fair. This is fake. And again, we don't know if that's true or not. But if he doesn't want this, don't associate with people that could do something like this. And I think that's something that he's got to learn a little bit. And it sucks. Maybe you want to live your life a certain way and kind of be who you are, and you're not able to do that because of other things. And so in a sense, I feel for Zion Williamson when it comes to something like that. But if this kind of wakes him up and realizes this isn't what he wants anymore and starts making changes, like we've seen how talented of a player he can be. He is truly someone very, very special out there on a basketball court. And he's capable of incredible things and leading this team very far. He's not lived up to that potential. He's been a disappointment so far. But maybe, we talked the other day about, like, does Joe Dumars get through to him? It doesn't matter if Joe Dumars gets through to him or not, right? This is a Zion thing. And since Zion's not going to be hanging out with Joe Dumars on a day-to-day basis, I don't really care or think that Joe Dumars getting through to Zion is going to make any sort of changes. But maybe this is the type of situation that forces Zion to make the changes that he needs to make to have the type of basketball career that he wants to have. And so you can look at this, assuming these are proven false, that, this woke him up, he's made changes, and now look at him succeeding on the court with the New Orleans Pelicans. That's how this ends well. Is that likely? I do not know. That's going to be up for you to decide if it's likely or not, and we'll just have to kind of wait and see. But just serious allegations that are, again, we've kind of laid out both sides of this here, and I think it could be the last straw with the Pelicans, but it just puts them in an awful spot no matter what, other than the one scenario where it does kind of go well. So we'll see. It's going to be TBD. There's probably going to be more coming out with this. We'll keep you updated here on Locked On Pelicans around that. So I appreciate y'all for listening. Hopefully I did this show right. It's not easy to talk about these things with the proper, and putting them in the proper context is important too. So I appreciate y'all listening to the show here on Locked On Pelicans. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all next time.